You're a direct result of, you look around, you're a direct result of what you've attracted. The questions you ask yourself control what you focus on. You need to look in the mirror and you need to answer that question, like, who are you?
Welcome back to Relatable Wisdom, the podcast where everyday people share the quotes that have shaped their life, inviting us all to reflect and grow together. Today, we're joined by Billy, a former HR executive who transformed his life to become a global movement leader and author. With a passion for helping others break through their limits and discover their true purpose, Billy's journey is a testament to the power of reinvention and abundance. Let's dive into the heartfelt conversation and uncover the wisdom that has inspired Billy along the way. What's your name and what's your favorite quote?
Yeah, Billy Fowler. And my favorite quote is, the questions we ask ourselves control what we focus on.
Mm. Is that your quote or is this someone else's quote?
I've been saying that my whole life.
When did you come to this realization?
So I'm in my 50s, so I'm 53. So I would say probably when I was in my 20s.
Okay. That's a pretty long time. Questions we ask ourselves. Wait. Questions we ask ourselves control what we focus on? Is that what you said?
The questions we ask ourselves control what we focus on.
Okay. Questions we ask ourselves control what we focus on. The questions we ask ourselves control what we focus on. Can you explain this for me? Like I am far.
So if I wanted to learn how to play soccer, I would go get a soccer ball and I would just start kicking it around. I would just start doing whatever came to my mind. But if I had an opportunity to play with one of the world's best soccer players in Africa, then if I spent any time with them, they're going to show me different things. They're going to ask me different questions that I never even know. So the more they ask me questions, the more I'd be able to focus on how to be a better soccer player. So that's the same way with my business and the movement that I'm trying to initiate throughout the world. Is if you hang around me long enough, you're going to start asking different questions based upon manifestation and activation. There's spiritual laws that go along with every part of your life should be an overflow. So this is Overflow Nation. So every part of your life should be an overflow. If you look at your life and if you don't see your cupboards full with food and you don't see your relationships are full of love and if you don't, that's a direct result of you not unlocking the spiritual laws. And so you're not asking the right questions. If you don't ask the right questions, you're not going to get the right answers. And so the question you ask yourself, control, they don't try, they control what you focus on. So if you try to control something, you literally can shape and mold and shift the way you move.
Yeah. You mentioned you've had this realization for a pretty long time, very long time. Um can you give me an example or instances over the course of what I'll say over the course of 30 years now or even more, where you've seen this philosophy play out in real time in your life?
Yeah, I would say in terms of my own personal business, I think that my entire process of what I'm rolling out throughout the world right now is a direct result of what we're talking about. I think that my evolution from a young man until now is a result of all this. And I think that when you listen today and you follow what I have going on, you'll understand. I'm a young boy that saw individuals in my life giving, and I saw my parents give. I saw my grandmothers give a lot to families. And so I started to understand some of those spiritual laws in terms of how important it is to give. And I think that I started asking different questions. So I hung around my buddies when I was 8, 9, 10 years old, and their parents didn't really give. They just took. They just basically went out and they were merchants. They actually took people's money, but they didn't give. And so I think that with my upbringing and my evolution, I saw a lot of. So I started asking myself different questions, like, why is it that my family gives and my other friends don't give? And I see the outpouring of what happens when you give. I think that's another spiritual law is giving. So what I have to offer is part of my evolution, and that's basically like if I were to open my brain and show you what's inside of here, it would be a lot of it has to do with giving. And I think that, but it's focused and deliberate giving though. So, and I think that that's where a lot of people go wrong. They just give without expecting to receive, and they don't. So I call it controlled, structured giving. So if you want more money, or if you want more clothes, if you want more food, you have to give that specific thing. And so, but part of my program is I show you how to keep track. So you don't have to have an Excel spreadsheet. You can have a normal sheet of paper, but you go out and get a sheet of paper and say, on today, on today's date at this time, I gave away a cup of coffee or whatever you can do within your wheelhouse. It doesn't have to be a lot of things, and then you'll see what'll happen is it'll 10x. You'll say, oh, wow, I gave somebody a cup of coffee and somebody gave me 2 cups of coffee. And then you write down the date when it happens. The same thing happens when you give money. You go out and give maybe 50 cents or $1 or whatever you can afford. And then you'll mark down the date, and then you'll see when it comes back to you. And then you'll start to see the flow, the ebbs and flow of the universe and how these things happen. So I have a YouTube channel called Are You Mathing? Like Are You Mathing? And it's manifestation plus activation equals overflow. So I always ask people, are you mathing? And they say, what do you mean? I mean, we know about math, we know about statistics, and we know about physics and all that, but are you mathing? And a lot of people struggle to answer that question because they don't understand that you're a direct result of, you look around, you're a direct result of what you've attracted. And so manifestation involves spiritual laws. Activation is, how do you activate those things? You can manifest something, but how do you act? I'm not talking about voodoo or hoodoo. I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about just the nature of giving and how that equates to. So there's social sciences involved with, and that's why a lot of organizations are doing so well. And that's why a lot of non-for-profits are doing so well, is because they understand the concept and spiritual laws surrounding involving giving. So just like you, if you want to have more listeners, you want to have more people integrated into your ecosystem, you're going to have to start giving people things. And I think that you're going to have to be very deliberate. And I think when you start asking those questions, then you start controlling what you focus on, and you'll see a better return on investment, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess the question would be, how do we ask the right questions? I mean, there are things we want to focus on, but then sometimes we're asking the wrong questions. And so because we're asking the wrong question, it takes our focus to something else other than the things we want to focus on. So how do we go about asking the right questions so that it eventually leads us to focus on the right things?
Yeah, so I think there's a number of ways to answer that question. I think so part of my program is that you're part of a power circle. So there's 4 people. So as soon as you get into the program, you're assigned to, and this is all over the world. So you can be a part of it right there in West Africa. And you're in West Africa, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you could be a part of it. And what happens is, once you read the book, I published a book called The Answer. And once you read the book, you'll be assigned, if you choose to, you'll be assigned to a power circle. You apply right on the website at overflownation.com. And then within that, there's ambassadors that are part of that group. So there's 2 mentors and 2 mentees, and they challenge you. And within the book, it teaches you how to organize your thoughts and how to navigate through that. And there's 9 weeks involved with this process. And I think that, so we're not a church, we're not a charity, we're a movement. And so I'm creating a blueprint for the world that I haven't seen before. I see a lot of people taking, but I don't see a lot of giving. If we get, like right now, the United States has $3.5 trillion worth of deficit. We're in the red, and we see so many homelessness people around, especially in California and New York, and they have no place to lay their head. But if you really want to change the nature of homelessness, you give. And I think if everybody started giving more, logically you would see less. And so when you start, your question is how do you ask the right question? It starts with you and what you want out of life, and how do you want it, and what do you see, and what do you want this world? So the seed of your soul is going to manifest when you start asking those things, because your soul is going to come out. So you're a body that possesses this, you're a spirit that possesses a soul that lives in the body. So your soul is going to speak to yourself. So you don't have to search and find and all that, because you're the answer. So you just like how do you see the world? What are you trying to achieve? And then you start asking those type of questions, but you need a mentor to champion you that through the process. And so I'm the architect behind the Overflow Nation, but part of this process is getting you connected with other power circles. So because we have the questions for you. And this is free. I mean, it doesn't cost any money to join the power. And that's the whole thing. And my whole thing is about giving. How can I give as I get older And, you know, and I look back, I'm like, man, I wish I would have had this when I was younger, because I was constantly searching for these answers. And that's why I started developing this quote that you asked me, like, the questions you ask yourself control what you focus on. Because I was asking for a long period of my life, I was asking the wrong questions. And because I didn't really know what to ask. And I think you need a champion, you need a mentor. And that's why I put these power circles together. And I lead these power circles, and those leaders have to go through my training. And then now they're nominated. And when they get out of the 9 weeks, then they become earners. I teach you how to learn AI. I partner with MIT and Harvard. And so, because I have my MBA. And so I've taught, you know, so that everybody that goes through these processes, they'll get involved with that, and they'll learn AI. And I created an agency. So you'll actually earn income once you get out of this. So it's a full process. It's not just, oh, now I know what I need to know. It's I'm plucking you out. And so it's not by chance that you and I have met today. I think it's ordained. And I think it's because this is a calling that I've had for many, many years. And so I'm in a place in my life now where I can actually do this.
Can you share some of the questions with us?
Absolutely. I think that let me grab my book. So within my book, The Answer, you know, that's the name of the book. It's called The Answer. And it's break every limit, receive every blessing. This time the abundance stays. And so the back of the book, I'll just give you context. It says, if you like The Secret, have you ever read the book The Secret? Okay, so The Secret sold over 300.
The Secret or
Yes.
The Secret?
The Secret.
Okay, I read The Secret. My friend,
So this,
my friend.
right. So this, I'm going to read the back of my book. It says, if you like The Secret, prepare to meet the answer. That's what this is, the answer. If you've ever been captivated by The Secret, imagine a book that not only reveals the power of your mind, but also shows you how to reclaim the very blueprint of your destiny. The Answer takes you on an unapologetically raw, yet deeply empowering journey, shattering old beliefs, breaking through financial and emotional barriers, and inviting you to embrace the abundance you were born to live. This is more than a guide. It's a wake-up call to transform every area of your life, from overcoming scarcity and self-doubt to igniting unstoppable personal power. So if I were to summarize one word for The Secret, it would be manifestation. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah.
Well, when you read my book, if you were to summarize it with one word, it would be activate. So if you take manifestation plus activation, you get overflow. And that's why we created Overflow Nation. And so within my book, to answer your question, because you want to know some of the questions, there is 9 specific weeks that you go through, right? And so the book has actually 15 chapters. And the last chapter is called The Final Question. And it says, you've heard from the book, because I claim that this book speaks to you. Matter of fact, it says the book that speaks back to you. And so it says, you've heard from the book, now you answer. And so it talks about section 1, the divine disruption you were born to become. And so in order to understand what you're born to become, you have to ask the question, how do you know what you're born to become?
Yeah.
And so start to walk you through that process. Another question is the world is waiting on your decision. I had a boss one time that asked me, he says, I'm going to be the best boss you've ever had. And he left my office. What is this?
Let's take a quick pause. If you're enjoying this conversation and want more thought-provoking ideas straight to your inbox, join the Relatable Wisdom email list. It's free, quick, and filled with bite-sized insights, inspiring quotes, and behind-the-scenes reflections from our guests. Just head to relatablewisdom.com/join. That is relatablewisdom.com/join. Or tap the link in the show notes. And hey, subscribing to the podcast helps more than you think, and it's free. So if you haven't already, hit that follow button wherever you're listening. All right, let's get back to the conversation.
This is fantastic. I've never heard anybody say that before, because most people they're just your boss, you know? And he said, unapologetically, unsolicited, I'm going to be the best boss you've ever had. And so what did that do to me? Because I became a boss. And I'm like, so now I'm asking myself those questions like, hey, you know what? I'm going to be the best boss you've ever had. Only because I had such a great mentor. And so what did he do to live up to that? He did outstanding job. He was constantly, how's your day going? Good morning. Have a good weekend. How's your dog doing? Some bosses are very introverted. They don't say anything. They don't know you. They don't know you're married. They don't even care. And so I think that what I try to do now is I try to teach people how to be leaders. And I think in order to be a leader within Overflow Nation, you got to have a mentor. And so I have these classes on Saturdays and Sundays, and it really dives into the nature of what we're talking about. And so I highly encourage you or your listeners to log into overflownation.com and sign up for one of the classes, because it really teaches you the mental shift that you need, and we'll dive into some of these spiritual laws. My mother has a doctorate in theology, and so I was raised by this woman. And so, being under that mantle for so many years, she's taught me a lot about the spiritual aspects. But this is not a church, okay? This is not a charity. It's not a soup kitchen. We're not trying to be Salvation Army or anything like that. I don't discourage you from praying. It's just that's not what this is. What this is meeting you where you're at, whatever country you're in, because we want to meet 1 million people by the end of this year. We want to touch 1 million lives by the end of this year. And we teach people how to give every day. Within the ambassador program, every day we're going to tell you what to give. Go out and find we're going to tell you to look for, like, one of the days of the week, we're going to have you donate your money to a charity of your choice. You choose. Another day of the week, we're going to have you find a family and give that family some money. Another day of the week, we're going to have, and all this, what you're going to do is you're going to start creating gates around your life. All right. These are gates. All right. Because within the program itself, we have 4 gates. We have the faith gate. We have the education gate. We have the justice and recovery gate. And then we have the economic empowerment gate. And so, but you want to create gates around your life because of all the spiritual forces. And I think that that's what people need to understand. You're unlocking spiritual laws. And so if you're just aimlessly walking around through life and you have no specific blueprint, nobody's really guiding you. And I think that's the main reason why we have so many divorces and so many issues with love and financial economics, is because people aren't really trying to guide and direct that. And I think that when you go to some of these institutions, and I'm not going to knock on churches or whatever, it's a set system. So I didn't want to get into a religious system. I wanted to create a free-flowing community for people to get involved with. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, mission. Question you ask controls what you focus on. The questions you ask control what the questions you ask control what you focus on. I guess the question is I've asked you how do we ask the right questions? And you did give some frameworks, and you made reference to your book. How do we read that? Because sometimes there are things we think we focus on, but in recent, the things we actually focus on is different from what we think we focus on.
Yeah. So I think the best way to answer that is the first chapter in the book talks about the law of the mirror. And the law of the mirror is you taking a deep look at your life and part of your evolution thus far. Like, really, like, when nobody's looking, like, who are you? What is your integrity? What's your character like? Do you lead with high intent? All those things. And so you need to be able to answer that question. Nobody can answer that. Your wife, your spouse, your brother, your sister, your mom, your dad, your uncle, aunt, grandmother, grandfather, nobody can answer it, just you. They think they can answer it, but they don't really know you. And so you need to look in the mirror and you need to answer that question, like, who are you? And so you can ask this at a 10-year-old, a 20-year-old, or a 30-year-old. You can ask that question, and everybody's going to give it a different. The nice thing about the way we're made is that just like it took so much courage for you to open up and actually start this podcast. A lot of your friends probably may have said some positive or negative things, or they may have cast judgment about you. It didn't matter, but you had the confidence to start something because it was in the seed of your soul. And I think that that's part of what this is about, is you have a word for the world. You have a word. And so I think because of that, and the fact that you name this wisdom, is the definition of wisdom is knowledge related to understanding. Okay. Knowledge related to understanding. That's the definition of wisdom. You can look it up. The English vernacular has over 1 million definitions. People move here from other countries, and their goal is to learn 1 to 2 words a day for a year to 2 years. We have people that were born citizens within the United States that don't even know anything more than 50 words. And as a result, they don't know how to effectively communicate to not only other people, to themselves. So you must master your own language. And in life, if you don't master your own language, you're going to be ineffective. You're not going to be able to communicate, and you're going to be stuck constantly throughout life. You're not going to be able to effectively get a job. You're not going to be effectively get a wife or a husband or whatever you're trying to achieve because you don't know how to effectively, because you're only grappling. Like I've always been big in martial arts, in the high belts. And so we grapple, when we get on the ground, we grapple, right? We wrestle. So, but if you only know one or two moves, I'm probably going to get you in a hole. You're not going to be able to get away because I'm a high belt. So I know a lot of different things. So that's the way you look at life. If you only know a few different words with your mouth, you're not going to be able to effectively communicate yourself out of situations. That's why the 1% of the world are so wealthy, is because they mastered the art of communication with their own mind. Now, how do you extrapolate that? Now in 20, that's why I partner with MIT and Harvard, because I want people to go through our program and understand AI. You can put prompts in your life. If you're in a domestic situation and if you can't get out, if you're homeless, if you can get your hand on an iPhone, if you can go to the library and download, if you're homeless today and you're listening to this, you can go to your local library and you can download ChatGPT. You can create a free version of ChatGPT. You can ask, how do I get unstuck? I don't want to be homeless anymore. And it'll give you various different charities and organizations that you can extrapolate to. And I think if you spend time with our leaders within Overflow Nation, they'll be able to provide you with those steps that you need. And I think that's how you get unstuck. And that's how you develop the right questions is you leverage AI. Because when you don't know what to say, and that's why I chose AI as opposed to any other thing for 2025, because I want you to be successful economically and be able to thrive and have an overflow. You should have much variations of different things in your life.
No, thank you so much for sharing that, and thank you so much for walking us through how we can get to ask the right questions and use with the help of AI kind of prompts and back and forth and get the some questions that are relevant to our own context or situation. Thank you so much for sharing this quote, and thank you so much for sharing the story um behind how the questions you've asked has controlled what you focus on. Wow, questions you ask control what you focus on. Questions you ask. If someone is listening right now and they wonder, you've talked so much about so many things that will be opening curiosity gaps. You talked about working with MIT, you've talked about the book, you've talked about so many things. And they're like, okay, yeah, I'm pretty interested in what this gentleman has to say. I want to learn more about what he talked about on the episode, what he's doing. Where can they go learn more about you and the work you're doing, and check out your project?
Yeah, so I would say the best way would be to visit the website, overflownation.com, overflownation.com, all one word. And so log on. There'll be a section for you at the bottom to put in your email. You can get our monthly newsletters. You can purchase the book. Once I get your email, if there's a contact us page, which is separate than the email, is a hey Billy, I got a question for you. Reach out that way. Because rather than just give you my LinkedIn or give you my Instagram, just go straight to the website. It has everything there. We're going to be launching videos out in the next couple of weeks and a bunch of other exciting things from universities and whatnot. We're also partnering with Feed America, Feed the World, different organizations that'll help you economically. And so, yeah, we're just like I said, I'm at a phase where I want to see the world change and shift. And so I definitely urge you guys to stay connected. And also Instagram and at Overflow_Nation.
Yeah, thank you so much once again, Bill Fowler, for coming on the podcast and for sharing your favorite quote. And yeah, thank you so much. It was
Thank you.
a delight to chat with you. I'm going to stop the recording now, and it should take a couple of seconds. Thanks for listening to Relatable Wisdom. If you found something meaningful in this episode, make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. If you'd like to support the show, you can do that by buying me a coffee. The link is in the show notes. Every little bit keeps the conversations going. I'm your host, Wisdom Okonkwo, and I will see you in the next one. Until then, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep growing.